Welcome back to Feed the Post. It's been a minute since I have done one of these, but I figured just with the regular season being done, figured I'd wrap up the regular season, talk about some postseason awards, maybe get into a little bit of a mailbag if there are questions to get to. If not, maybe talk about the Big Ten tournament coming up, but that might be a tomorrow thing as well. So it feels good to be back. I'm looking forward to hopefully getting back into these as we are now officially in March. Selection Sunday is 6 days away at this point. Big Ten tournament starts in 2 days. Should be a good time, but this was a really interesting just Big Ten season in general. Purdue wins it by 3 games. They are obviously projected to win it coming into the season. Illinois also gets second place, and that's a pretty. And then there's a gap, right? And then it's just a bunch of teams once again. Nebraska kind of separated themselves. I think a little bit in Northwestern as well as that 3-4. And then it's Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa. Indiana has a late surge. Ohio State has a late surge to kind of creep back in. Minnesota, who was projected last or second to last by many, they're right up there at 9-11. Penn State, the other team. I personally was more confident in Penn State than Minnesota. They also finished 9-11. Like, this was a team that was scrappy, obviously. And then once you go down, Maryland, probably the biggest disappointment of the season. I don't know if it's Maryland or if it's going to be Michigan State. One of those two. I guess it depends on if Michigan State makes the tournament or not. But Maryland, huge disappointment. Rutgers, 7-13, kind of what I expected. I thought that they would have a little bit of a down year. Not exactly in the way that I thought would happen. I figured their offense would be a little bit better, but their defense would regress, and it did not. Their defense was phenomenal. They just could not score the ball. And then Michigan, they played 20 games of Big Ten basketball. They tried. They did their best. And that's where we're at. Ulamog says, can I still submit mailbag questions here? Yeah, definitely go for it. If anybody has questions, throw them in the comments. I will get to them kind of towards the end of this show. Don't expect this to be a crazy long show, but I will get to them at the end of this. So let's dive in a little bit deeper into kind of the season recap, right? I just went over the standings. Purdue obviously wins, and we'll start with them. And Purdue did what was expected of them. We knew, with any team, you are going to drop a few games. And so they dropped one to Northwestern in a really, really fun game. They dropped one at Nebraska, in which Nebraska just, Purdue didn't play terribly. Nebraska just played really, really well. And then you have the Ohio State game where I think when I look at the 3 losses, I think Northwestern played really, really well against Purdue. Nebraska played really, really well. And yes, Purdue had things that they did as well to kind of hurt themselves, but it felt like the other team beat them. The Ohio State game was the one game where it really felt like Purdue just focus wasn't there. And then you have that combined with Ohio State. That was the first game with Diebler and the new coach. They came out playing really ready to play. That's just when you get that matchup of, hey, this team isn't really ready to play, and this team absolutely is. That's where that loss comes from. And credit Ohio State, obviously, with that. But this is what Purdue was supposed to do. I was hoping for a big jump from Braden Smith. He absolutely did it, and then some. I don't know if he'll make an All-American team, but he has a legitimate case to do it, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And then the Lance Jones addition has been gigantic for them. It's a team that has struggled with, being able to, one, defend the perimeter, and Lance Jones has filled that, and two, just having that confidence. When you looked at the FDU loss, the biggest thing that stands out is, when I think about it, the first thing that pops into my head is Mason Gillis specifically, and it was other guys too, passing up wide open threes. Like, they lost the confidence. The shooting wasn't there. And when that happens, like, that's how you lose to a 16 seed. This is the exact opposite this season. Purdue absolutely does not have that, in large part because of guys like Lance Jones. Like, it is just been pretty crazy what he's been able to do for this team. And then, hey, Zach Edey is National Player of the Year, best player in the country. And even after winning National Player of the Year last year, like, there are a lot of things I felt like he improved on this year, which is pretty crazy to say. I think he moves a little bit better defensively. I think he's gotten a little bit better with some of his reads in the post. I think he's also done a little bit better job of just being able to work and produce system now of incorporating more pick and rolls, because that's what Braden Smith is so good at, being able to roll, being able to even short roll to an extent. And, he doesn't always have to catch it at the rim. He can catch it 10 feet out on the roll, 8 feet out on the roll. He did it against Wisconsin yesterday. My video that the Purdue-Wisconsin film breakdown, I talked about that in one of the plays. Edey, catches it probably 8 feet out and he's still able to get to the rim. That's just not stuff he was able to do last year. That's why I'm confident with Purdue. This tournament is just, there feels like there's a lot more ways for them to win. Last year it was very much like, because they couldn't shoot also, and Purdue's the second best shooting team in the country right now from three. Since Purdue couldn't shoot last year, it was all, what can Zach Edey do for us? And yes, that is obviously still a major point of this offense, but Braden Smith can go, Fletcher Lawyer can go, Lance Jones, Mason Gill, like TKR even. TKR had like a 25-point game or whatever against Illinois. Purdue has dudes that can go, and I am confident. So moving to Illinois, and I'm not going to spend probably as long on all of these teams as Purdue, but Illinois has been an interesting team. They flipped identities almost throughout basically halfway through the season. They started out as a defensive first team, and you just kind of figure it out on the way on offense. Hawkins being at the 5 was an interesting wrinkle that Underwood has gone to the whole year. It puts Hawkins in a bad spot defensively because of just having to guard these post players. That's probably not best suited for him. But at the same time, then their offense, man. Marcus Domas, Darren Shannon, Coleman Hawkins, and then you get the role players around that can knock down enough threes. They're just, it's so impressive what they do offensively, because just it can come from pretty much like any of those three, especially like Terrence Shannon has had games where he's put up 30 plus. Obviously, Domas has taken over games. Hawkins has had multiple games where he just becomes the go-to guy. And they're just, for the most part, there really hasn't been too many nights off. And now their last 2 games haven't been the best offensively. So against Purdue and Iowa, that'll be something to monitor as we head into Big Ten tournament. But before that, I mean, they were just on an absolute tear. And the thing with Illinois is, like, oftentimes when you have this good of an offense, they're the 4th ranked offense per KenPom, is you have to shoot the ball insanely well from 3. They definitely shoot the ball well. They're 121st, but it's not like they're living and dying by the 3. They can just get you with booty ball, or Terrence Shannon just in transition, just literally just being faster than everybody else on the floor, getting to the rim. And so it's impressive what they've done. The other team that there's 2 more teams I probably want to spend a little bit of time on, and then we'll kind of fly through the rest. Nebraska, 12-8, 22-9 overall. They are going to be in March Madness. Just an impressive season from Fred Hoiberg, and we'll talk about Coach of the Year later. But you know, he brings in, I believe, 6 transfers. I could pull it up here. I know I have it somewhere, but 6 or 7 transfers, and they all made good contributions for the most part. Rank Moss, really good center for them. Bryce Williams has been huge on the wing. Actually, I deleted that. I don't have that. My bad. But either way, they bring in a lot of new guys, and obviously they bring back Casey Tominaga, Jawan Gary, Jamarcus Lawrence, Josiah Alec. He was the another transfer that came in. And they've been a team that's improved, especially as of late, because right around early February, they were very much just a bubble team. And at that point, they were more of an offensive team. They were a team that they have so many options that at least 2 of them were usually going to show up. But then their defense was getting them. Their defense had to be good. And over the past, they're 6-1 in their past 7 games. Their defense has just really flipped a switch. It's felt like they've gotten really back into. They play like essentially, it's not no middle defense, but what they do is they really help in the paints. They are going to force you to shoot threes, and then they're going to close out and contest those threes for the most part. I mean, that Purdue win that they had, Purdue attempted 33 threes that game and 24 twos. Like that's what Nebraska wanted to do, and they did it really, really well. Then you have the scores with Tominaga, with Williams. Jawan Gary is a guy that needs to be brought up for all defense team. He's a guy that needs to be brought up for just like even 3rd team all conference, because he's probably had the biggest impact on that team, and they're 3rd. And then the other team that want to dive deep into is Northwestern, also 12-8. This was a team that I wrote off multiple times, and Chris Collins and Boo Buie and the rest just kept doing their thing. They are, I think they're a very high variant team. And maybe, I don't know if I'll talk about it too much today, but over the next week or so, we'll definitely talk about, the big tournament, the dance, and what, all these Big Ten teams can do in that. Northwestern is a team to me that it wouldn't shock me if they make like the second weekend or an even, Sweet 16 Elite 8 type. Also wouldn't shock me if they lose by 20 in the first round. I think they're a pretty high variant team, very slow paced team. They're going to shoot and to make a lot of threes, and they're also going to give up a lot of threes. Their defense hasn't been good, but just with Boo Buie, Ryan Langborg. I know Ty Berry is now hurt and done for the year, but you're getting contributions from those two on the perimeter, and they're shooting. Boo Buie is, I think, the second best shooter in the Big Ten this season per percentage. Yeah, 48.3% in Big Ten play, which is just nuts. And I think that's only behind Fletcher Lawyer there. Brooks Barnheiser took a huge jump. We saw some of it towards the end of last season, but now he's taken even another jump. Nick Martinelli's come off the bench and into now a starting role for Northwestern, which is with the injuries that they've had to deal with. And he's also become really productive. I want to see what he's like next year. In my mind, he's just kind of like another, like not quite the next Tyler Wall, but they both just have that game of they're just going to spin and do footwork and get to their dominant hand and throw it at the rim, and it's going to go in. And that's just what they do. So impressive stuff from Chris Collins, keeping them on track. Now we will fly through the rest of these. Wisconsin started off great. I could never fully get on board with them. I just don't think their defense has ever been good enough. And then it's also fallen off a little bit. And their offense, they're another team it's a lot of jumpers, and they were hitting a lot early in the season. Now they're 179th in 3-point percentage. I don't think, I don't think many guys are shooting well in Big Ten play. Yeah, I mean, AJ Storr, 33% from 3 in Big Ten play. Stephen Carl's 40% on like 1.5 attempts a game. Max Klesmit, 38.9%. Chucky is probably the one that's struggling a lot. Where says that? Yeah, Chucky, 31% in Big Ten play. Shout out John Blackwell, the freshman. He was ranked in the 200s, and he was one when I watched film last year. I didn't get a ton right with the freshmen and chancellors, but he was one I got right of just like, how is this dude ranked in the 200s? He's going to contribute, and he did. But it's just I just have not been able to trust their defense at all this entire season. MSU. And we'll talk about MSU later. We'll have a couple, question on them. They're interesting, to say the least. 18-13 overall, 10-10 in Big Ten play, but their metrics are really good and are probably going to get them into the tournament. Izzo didn't go to the portal, and I know it's not all just that, but Izzo didn't go to the portal to get a big, and that's been a gigantic weak spot for them. It's just no production on offense down low. And so it's even more than ever. It's Walker, it's Hogard, it's Akins, and then Hall. Hall's been really good, especially as of late. But it's what kind of shots can you make? Can you be a tough shot making team? If you are, you're going to win. If not, you're probably going to lose. And more, it's been Big Ten play. It's been split. But they're just it's just been crazy because they lose a lot of close games, and so a couple bounces go differently, and they're probably 12-8, and we're talking about them as like a 7-seed or 6-seed or whatever. But there was at times there's just too much on Tyson Walker. And by too much, I just mean that like you can go through your main guy, and Tyson Walker is obviously that 100%. But even just the way that they got to it was a lot of isolation. It was a lot of pin down and then just kind of roll from there. It just at times it was basically just, here's the ball. Can you go score something for us? And it ended up biting them. So Iowa next, 10-10. Coming into the year, I did not expect the freshmen to do what they did, especially Owen Freeman. Just a great year for them. And I know that they want more, right? They're one of those first 8 out type of teams right now for the tournament. That the Illinois loss yesterday is big. If they got that, they would have been looking pretty good to make the tournament. Tony Perkins and Payne Sanford, really just good years from them too, and it's helped carry. It's just, it's kind of another Iowa year. Just really good offense. The defense isn't there. But it's just kind of French is showing it doesn't really matter who is in his system. He's just going to get good players, and he's going to get a productive offense. And that's what Iowa did. Indiana, they also finished 10-10. They've won their last 4, home against Wisconsin, at Maryland, at Minnesota, home against MSU. Lots of controversy, and maybe we'll do a deeper dive on them once the season ends. But with Mike Woodson coming back, they lose Liam McNeely for next year. There's so much talk of like who's staying, who's not. I know Trey Galloway and Anthony Leal are both coming back for their 5th year. But this is a team that was super frustrating because they lost. I think they were 2-7 at one point, or 2-9 in a 2-8 in a 10-game stretch in the middle of the Big Ten season. And it's kind of the same things as last year of just like, there's not really 3-point shooting. And even the 3-point shooting wasn't like great. Mackenzie Mbako is probably their best shooter. and it's just tough to run stuff for him. You're running two bigs, which you can do, right? And when you look at Purdue, maybe they ran two bigs with TKR and Edey. Your spacing has to be perfect. It really does around them, and that IU wasn't always able to do that, and it hurt them. They didn't have the 3-point threats, and then the defense wasn't there. I expected this in my mind they got to 10-10, so they turned it around, and they've played much better as of late. But in my mind, they would get to 10-10 because their defense was good and their offense was just what it was. But their defense really wasn't there. I thought Ware would have not a bigger impact because he was very good. Don't get me wrong, and we'll talk about Ware come Big Ten awards, but. Just with Ware, Galloway, I know Johnson was hurt for a decent bit of the year. I thought this would be a little bit better defensive team. Ohio State 9-11. They're another team that's pretty hot right now. Like IU, won 6 of their last 8, including a win over Purdue. Obviously, a lot of 5-1 in their past 6 with the new coach. This is a team that for about 12 games just refused to defend. And then they've just had so much more energy after, the firing and Diebler hiring. They can make a tourney run. They're going to probably have to rattle off 3 wins that my guess would be in the Big Ten tournament. We'll talk about that maybe more tomorrow. They have the offense, and Bruce Thorne hasn't maybe been as efficient. Roddy Gales, his efficiency hasn't been there. Jamison Battle has been, for the most part, really, really good. I think a big thing too is with this kind of win streak, you see Devin Royal having a lot bigger impact, both on the offensive and defensive end. He's a freshman. I think it just took a little bit of time. Plus, just what happens with the coaches firing, right? You're going to switch up roles a little bit. It's just how it's going to work. And I think Devin Royal especially has taken a bit of advantage of that. Scotty Milton, another good freshman off the bench for them. Like Ohio State is probably pretty set for, well, I'm gonna take that back. I'm not gonna say they're pretty set for the future because this is gonna be a huge offseason. Like any one of those guys could transfer. Bruce Thorne could, Roddy Gale could. Battle, I believe, will be done. Yeah, he'll be done after this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. Minnesota 9-11, just a really good story for them. They start off the season 12-3. They do have the easiest non-conference schedule in the entire country. And in terms of making the tournament, that probably hurt them a little bit, but at the same time, it allowed this team to win. This was a team that was obviously awful last year. They bring in a couple new pieces in Elijah Hawkins, Mike Mitchell, Cam Christie, the freshman, has been fantastic. Dawson Garcia has taken another step. The defense has fallen off very much as of late, especially, but they've found more of an identity of being a team that can just kind of attack on offense. You can throw it to Elijah Hawkins and pick and roll. Garcia can get his. Cam Christie, like they have multiple guys that can score. When I watched them last year, I was like, I didn't know what their identity was. They have one now. Penn State 9-11. I thought their defense was going to be much better, but their offense was better, way better than I expected. A lot of it was Ace Baldwin, also Kanye Clary, who is dismissed from the team. But Ace Baldwin really towards the end started figuring it out. You started seeing some of the 3-point shooting come around towards the end as well. Like that was Mike Rhodes' whole thing, I think, this offseason in his first year at Penn State was, we're going to get guys that are 6'7" wings that can shoot threes, that can hopefully defend, and we'll figure it out from there. They were a team that, just aside Wahab, no inside presence whatsoever. And they really, really hurt them. 304th in 2-point percentage on defense. It was very much just, can they force a turnover in the backcourt? If not, then the team is gonna win, and that's kind of what happened. But they still got to 9 wins with a brand new team. Like I think they had to fill 10 roster spots is what Mike Rhodes did when he came in. So still very impressive stuff from him in his first season. Maryland 7-13, the most disappointing team, I would say. It's the easiest thing is to look at. They're 352nd in 3-point percentage, 28.4%. I thought they were going to be a top 3, maybe 4 team. I figured Jameer Young could even take another jump. I thought that I didn't always trust Deshaun Harris-Smith's shooting in the offseason. It was one of the bigger things I had concerns about. But I still thought he'd be able to attack better. And he's started to come along a little bit lately. I think he's been playing a little bit better. But that combined with, I thought Kaiser would be more effective. And then Maryland just didn't quite get the pieces they needed in the portal. I know that Chance Stevens was one of their portal additions, and he tore his I believe he tore his ACL in the offseason. He was like a 45% 3-point shooter on high volume at where was he? It was a West Coast team last year. It wasn't Pepperdine. It was one of those California teams out there. I do forget, Loyola Marymount maybe. So they'll get him back next year, and he should provide some shooting. But it'll be interesting to see. I know it's only year 2 for Kevin Willard, but after what he did in year 1 to have this, be interesting to see what happens with him. Rutgers 7-13. They were Rutgers. Their defense was elite, and then just on offense, you had that little bit of spurt with when Jeremiah Williams came back. But I think that was him playing above what his normal is, and he's still very good and provides a lot for them. But they need somebody that can set the table for others. Jeremiah Williams can do it to some extent. If you guys hear that beeping in the background, can you let me know? Because I can go turn it off if I need to. But Jeremiah Williams can do it for an extent. Derek Simpson was kind of, I was hoping that he would be able to take that jump, and he did some, but just the shooting wasn't there that it needed to be. And just in general, this was a terrible 3-point shooting team. They couldn't shoot at the rim either, pretty much across the board. They were really bad at free throws. Like it was quite simply, they just couldn't make shots. And some of that scheme, some of that's personnel. It is what it is. Then Michigan 3-17. And that's they didn't play defense. Their offense was good at times. They were good in the first halves for most games, and then they would just fall apart. I don't expect Juwan Howard to be back, but we'll see what happens. I don't want to really spend too much more time on them. So that's the season recap. We'll get into some Big Ten awards now. And then after that, get to a couple of questions that we have for the mailbag. Have a couple here in the comments, have a couple from Twitter. So do appreciate everybody tuning in. And let's get into it. So I'll just kind of roll through it, first team and all that, and then we'll just get through them all, talk about it a little bit, and then move on from there. So there it is. Trying to pull it up. So national player, or not, well, he is national player of the year, but player of the year for the Big Ten, Zach Edey. What is there to say? Like, he was Zach Edey, averaged the most points in the league, averaged the most rebounds in the league, is going to be one of the most impactful defenders in the league, one of the most important defenders in the league. It's Zach Edey. That's not player of the year, obviously, right there. The rest of the first team, though. So Zach Edey, Boo Buie, and Marcus Domask were locks for me personally. Those two were just two I for sure had in. I do have Braden Smith in as well. I think when you win the conference by 3 games, and I think that's part of my parameters, I should step back, is like I think winning for the most part impacts it more maybe than some like slight efficiency or individual statistics. It's like, how do you impact winning? And if I'm inconsistent with that, call me out throughout the rest for sure. But that's where like Braden Smith maybe goes from a second team to a first team over like Jameer Young for me. And that's kind of why also Terrence Shannon at the end of the day is the last spot on the first team for me. It was one that I went back and forth with him and Jameer Young. Similar stats. Terrence Shannon was one more, or Illinois one more, but also obviously Terrence Shannon missed 5 games, and regardless of all that, like, he missed 5 games. It is what happened. But I still just the impact that he did have on winning, and just the ability that he had to kind of take over games on a winning team like that, I give him the nod. Ulamog here said my first team is Edey, Boo, Domas, Braden, and Jameer Young. So we had 4 the same, and I'm not gonna, if somebody has Jameer Young over Terrence Shannon, you're not going to see me arguing. I totally would agree with or understand that. Obviously, I don't agree because I have Terrence Shannon, but totally get it. Second team, Jameer Young. We already talked about him, and yes, Maryland was bad this year and disappointing, but he still put up crazy numbers. I also want to throw out all of like the stats and stuff is purely Big Ten play. I assume that's how voting is, but if it's for the whole season, then my bad. But I do it based off just Big Ten play because it's Big Ten first team. So, I mean, he still averaged 22 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal a game. Like, he put up crazy numbers, and he honestly was the only reason that Maryland wasn't at Michigan level. At some points, it really felt like. So he's getting the nod there. Tyson Walker, we kind of already talked about it with MSU. He just had to do so much for this team. He's another guy where it's like, if he's not producing at the level that he is, MSU is not even probably close to the tournaments. Dawson Garcia is going to be next. I think he just had another really, really good year on a much improved Minnesota team. He also took a leap himself, 17.8 points, 6.3 rebounds, Shot pretty well from the field, and so he's going to get it. My last two spots, those three for second team were kind of the locks for me. This next one, this next one's actually a lock for me, and I'm confident in it. And then after that, the last spot was tough. But next one is Coleman Hawkins. He impacted Illinois, I think, more than most people realized. Like when you look at on-off splits, when he's on the floor, Illinois is arguably the best offense in the country. When he's off the floor, Illinois is just an okay team. They just had what he provides, especially at that 5 spot. And although the defense wasn't great as maybe I'd want, he still was decent in some aspects for sure. And it's not like he was a bad defender. He just provides everything that Illinois needs. He increases 3-point percentage by a good bit this year. I'm pulling up the exact percentages right now. Last year 28.2% in Big Ten play from 3. This year 40.5%. So that's a huge jump. He cut down on the turnovers. He still moved the ball. He rebounded well. He defended the rim some. He's able to switch on the perimeter. I don't think there's too many more impactful players than Coleman Hawkins in the Big Ten. This last spot was one that I debated with, and even as I was kind of logging on to the show, I'm still sort of debating, but I'm going to go Colel Ware, especially because Indiana was able to get to 10-10. He was 10th in scoring, I believe 2nd in rebounding. He was 2nd or 3rd in blocks, or 4th in blocks, sorry. He provided a presence for a lot of games where it's just Indiana couldn't function without him on the floor. He did it. The motor was the big thing. I think he improved in that a lot this year. He knocked down some threes. He just kind of did he was kind of the base for what Indiana needed. It just felt like without him on there, especially at times on the defensive end, that was when they just really didn't know what to do, because he could clean up some messes if the perimeter breaks down or whatever. He could be the guy that could do it. So I'm going to roll with him there as my second team. Moving on to third team. Next, this one is tough, and this is one where there's probably like 15 guys that I think have a legitimate case for third team All Big Ten. It's tough going back and forth, but I'm gonna go AJ Storr as the first spot there. I put him on because still at the end of the day, even though Wisconsin fell off, Wisconsin and fell off is they still are 5th in the Big Ten. It's not like they're 12th or anything. And AJ Storr was a large part of that. The reason he wasn't second team for me is because I think the defense from AJ Storr was really bad, just for the most part this season. But the offense, you can't deny 17.2 points a game. He was a guy that Wisconsin could go to when they needed a bucket. And so he's going to make it for me. Next, Ace Baldwin. Lead the league in steals, one of the higher assist rates, and also tasked with a lot of scoring. Penn State finished 9-11, and they got good production from some of their role players. They're not 9-11 without Ace Baldwin. They're right at the bottom of the Big Ten without him, and so had to throw him on there. Next, I'm going to go Juwan Gary from Nebraska, and Nebraska is a team where they finished 3rd in the Big Ten. I would say they're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten too, comfortably right now. Juwan Gary is the most impactful player, I think, on Nebraska. What he does both offensively and defensively, yes, he probably doesn't have the stats maybe as some of these other guys, but he just impacts the way in a way that Nebraska absolutely needs. He's another guy. When he's on the floor, Nebraska, fantastic team. When he's off the floor, Nebraska's defense, especially, awful. It's just been bad. He can switch 1 through 4 comfortably, some 5s. He understands the system well. He does what he's supposed to do. He can knock down some shots, score some, rebounds well. So he's going to make it for me. These last 2 spots were the toughest ones. I'm going to go Peyton Sanford for one of them. 17 points, 6 rebounds, 2.7 assists, shot the ball really well from 3, 37% on high volume. To me, it felt like it was either him or Tony Perkins, and I went Sanford just because he was a little bit more efficient, and I know Tony Perkins is probably a little bit better defender, but what Sanford did this year, knowing that he'd have more attention and be more of that number 1, number 2 type guy, he stepped up to it. He's 9th in scoring in the Big Ten, shot the ball still well, and then also provided other stuff. He was able to handle the ball a little bit more. He was able to rebound a little bit more, and so I threw him on there. And last spot, I'm going to go Cliff Amore because of the defense. Average, most blocks in the league. And the offense just didn't take the jump that I wanted, that Rutgers fan wanted. And yes, but he still dominated the glass. He still absolutely dominated the interior. And he's also, he has the ability, especially on defense, to kind of step out and hedge and do what he needs to do on the perimeter against pick and roll or be in drop coverage. And so just because he's so impactful on the best defense in one of the best defenses in the country, I'm going to slide Cliff Amore there. Couple honorable mentions though that I was deciding between. Malik Marinu, he had a really good year. Malik Hall, I think quietly had a very good year for MSU, especially as a late. Rank Moss for Nebraska. He was probably second most impactful to me. I already mentioned Tony Perkins, and then Bryce Williams for Nebraska. Nebraska could have had like 3 third-team guys. If I wouldn't be shocked if that's what happens. Awards, I believe, come out tomorrow, and if I do another live stream reviewing the Big Ten tournament, maybe we can go over them a little bit. So those were first, second, third team. We'll move on to the defense team. And so my first 4 for defense team are locks for me. I don't think there's a case for them to be off. The 5th spot is definitely up for debate, though. For me, the 4 spots: Cliff Amore, Ace Baldwin, Zach Edey, Juwan Gary. Cliff, I already talked about. He's probably the most impactful defender purely at the rim. 2.9 blocks a game in Big Ten play. Like, teams just, if they tried him, it just wasn't going to go well. Ace Baldwin on the other end, the best perimeter defender. 2.7 steals a game. And he was a large part of that Penn State defense where it was just very much try to get a steal. And if not, Penn State was going to score. Zach Edey, I would still argue he might be the most purely impactful defender. He might not have the best stats, but I believe I should have had this pulled up. I'll pull it up now as I'm talking. I believe it's like a 20-point like a net rating of 20 difference when Zach Edey's on the floor compared to off the floor for Purdue's defense. And so basically what that means is when Zach Edey's on the floor, like, their defense is very good. And when he's off the floor, it's just not been good. And I'm finishing pulling it up here right now as I'm loading it on. When Zach Edey was on the floor, Purdue's defensive rating was 100.5. And so basically 1 point per possession is what that equates to. So it's just really good, 87th percentile. And now when Zach Edey was off the floor this season, why is it not loading? When Zach Edey was off the floor this season, their Purdue's defensive rating was 125.5. So per 100 possessions, that is teams would score 25 points more per 100 possessions when Zach Edey was off the floor compared to on. That 125.5, it would be the worst defense in the entire country. Zach Edey just makes impacts. And it's going to be a similar case for Juwan Gary for me. It's when you look, it's like a 17-point difference net rating compared to when he's on compared to off. And so Juwan Gary, he needs the respect too defensively. Very, very, can defend the perimeter, can defend on the interior, rebounds well. And so those 4 are the locks for me. This last one, it was between a few. It was between Julian Reese, Chucky Hepburn, and Coleman Hawkins for me. I think Illinois' team defense just wasn't quite there for me for Hawkins, even though he is pretty versatile. And also just because he was at the 5, he struggled defending post players. So I couldn't have him. I ended up going Julian Reese. I think when you have, Maryland was a top 10 defense or whatever for like pretty much the entire season. I think he was a big part of that, of being able to help protect the rim. Also, like, he moves pretty well for on the perimeter if needed. And so I threw him in my defensive player of the year. And this is one that, like, honestly, as of right now, I still don't even have like a true answer. I think for me, the 3 finalists would be Zach Edey, Cliff Amore, and Juwan Gary. I just don't think Ace Baldwin, I understand the case, but your team defense to me has to be just a little bit better. They were, let's see, per KenPom, they were the 10th best defense. So the 5th worst defense in the Big Ten play. And to me, so that's what takes Ace Baldwin out. I'm going to go Zach Edey. I think the order for me would be, I think to me it's between Edey and Amore. And then I think it's kind of what you value. Edey's just impact, like, even though maybe the numbers aren't as good as Amore's, his impact on the best team in the Big Ten, one of the best teams in the country, can't be overstated. I already talked about the numbers. Like it is just crazy how much worse Purdue's defense is without Zach Edey on the floor. And so I'm going to lean Edey. If people wanted Amori, I got no issue at all. He was the most probably the best defender on the best defense in the country, or top 4 defense in the country. I would have no issue with Amori being the choice for people. But I'm going to lean Edey. I don't love it. I really don't. And I don't know. It's a really close race, I think, between Edey and Amori for me. So move on to freshman team. And between the top 4 are locks, and then the 5th is just kind of like who do you want to throw in? So top 4 locks, and first player is also going to be the freshman of the year, Owen Freeman. I missed on Owen Freeman. I thought he needed at least a year to develop, and Fran McCaffrey was like, nope, he's good. He's just going to play, and he's going to be crazy productive. And he was just absolutely so good down low, on pick and roll, can move. Iowa's defense as a whole wasn't great, but he showed some flashes there as being this kind of central piece to that defense. So Owen Freeman's going to get it there for me. Cam Christie next. He has an off chance to be a one and done. The shot making that he showed was just so impressive. And he was a big part of Minnesota's success this season. So John Blackwell 3rd, and he was one, like I already talked about. He just impacts Wisconsin in such positive ways. That this game against Purdue, he was a big reason why Wisconsin was even close. And it kind of made a comeback at one point. It was because of John Blackwell. So I want to give him the nod. 4th, Mackenzie Mbako. He started off maybe a little bit slow, but by the end of the season, he was really, scoring the ball well, doing what he was supposed to do on the offensive end. The 5th spot to me is between Jermichael Davis from Rutgers and Deshaun Harris-Smith. I'm going to go Harris-Smith because I think the defense was a little bit better, but it really was, both had pretty big roles. Both weren't super efficient. I'm just going to lean Harris-Smith because I thought the defense was a little bit better. If you want to go Jermichael Davis, I got no issue. I'm going to shout out the transfer team, and I won't spend too much time on this, but I do think it's pretty straightforward. The Marcus Domask, transfer of the year, obviously. Ace Baldwin makes it. Khalil Ware, Jamison Battle from Minnesota to Ohio State, and I'm going to throw Lance Jones on there. I think maybe one of the guys from Nebraska can make it as well, like Rank Moss or Bryce Williams. I think they would have cases, but that would be my transfer team. 6th man of the year. It's between Mason Gillis, CJ Wilcher, and Parker Fox. And the more I think about it, I think I might lean Parker Fox because I think just like Purdue could function at times, obviously a lot without Mason Gillis, and he still was very, very, very good. Mason Gillis was phenomenal this year, and he's going to be a big reason if Purdue is able to make it far in March. Parker Fox, though, just like he just brought a different energy, especially on the defensive end, on an area where they struggled. He wasn't obviously like a shooter or anything, but could bang down low, could finish at the rim, shot really well from 2. So I'm going to lean Parker Fox. I would have said Mason Gillis a couple days ago, but I'm gonna lean Parker Fox there. Last one, Coach of the Year, and this will be one of the bigger debates. So I'm gonna go my third option for it would have been Chris Collins. I kind of already mentioned, like, I kept doubting him. Chris Collins just said, nope, we're gonna keep winning. My Coach of the Year, though, is Matt Painter, and I totally get the case for Fred Hoiberg. I really do. And if Fred Hoiberg wins, I'm not going to be mad at all. And honestly, if they're coaches of the year, might be best thing. Fred Hoiberg is the classic, or what's become classic in the Big Ten, of you have really low expectations and you do really well. And I think that should be, acknowledged, that should be awarded. But at the same time, Purdue wins the Big Ten again by 3 games with a roster that if you said this was the roster 2-3 years ago, nobody would have thought that they were a number 1 team. And so what Painter's able to do, developing, getting the guys into the right spots, I am going to lean them. And then just winning the Big Ten by 3 games. Like, it doesn't happen often. And I think it's there. But obviously, like, Fred Hoiberg was great this year. He brought in a bunch of new guys and was able to fit all of them into his system, identify guys in the portal that could fit the system, play well. So I'm going to lean Painter. I get it if it's Hoiberg, but that one's going to be interesting to see who it's actually awarded to. So I think that's all of the awards. I don't think I missed anything. If I did, let me know, but I think that is it. So with that, we've had a couple questions in the chat and then also on Twitter. I'll pull those up from Twitter right now, but Matt Patty Ice here says it should have been Matt Painter last year too. Winning your league by 3 games is good coaching. Ridiculous award. Yeah, it's just what you value as voters, as individuals. People value things differently. I totally will understand if Fred Hoiberg wins, but I think I agree. Like if you win by 3 games, it's got to stand for something. So, we'll start with the questions from Twitter. From Quentin Wetzel, who is your favorite player and why is it Coleman Hawkins? And Quinn's a really good follow, Illinois fan, but does a good job breaking down the game. So my favorite player in the Big Ten to watch is Braden Smith. Like, and I realized I just love passing. And Braden Smith's the best passer in the Big Ten. I know Hawkins averaged maybe a little bit more assist, but like Braden Smith's the best passer in the Big Ten. He might be the best passer in the country. So he's my favorite, but I love watching Coleman Hawkins. And I understand the antics people hate and all that, but just his versatility, like there is nobody like Coleman Hawkins in the Big Ten. There's nobody that can facilitate, rebound, shoot, create for both himself and others, and defend both on the perimeter and the interior like him. Like he is truly a one of one. And so I love watching him play. This next one from Mackie Park. So basically getting into, so he said season champions like in Indiana State, they lose in their league tournament versus middle of the power conference team for the NCAA tourney at large bids, which should happen. I think for me, I would love to see more mid majors. Even especially when they schedule pretty hard, they do what they can with their scheduling, and then they win a lot in the regular season. Like it, if they, Indiana State's the best example, and they'll be talked about the most. They lose one game in the conference tournaments, and so now they might not make it. But they've had a fantastic season. And we're gonna I do coverage for Boilers in the Stands. We're gonna have a show tomorrow with Tonsoni from Assembly Call, who also does Delphi bracketology. We're going to have a talk with him, or a conversation with him tomorrow, kind of diving into more of this too, of like what actually goes into it all. So tune into that tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, and that might be able to give a little bit better answer. Then the other one from Twitter from Todd Singer, as you review film, which 2 Big Ten offices seem the most similar? And so this was a really good question. And like my favorite offense to watch is Purdue's because of what Matt Painter is able to draw up and Braden Smith and all that. But when I was thinking about this question, the 2 that kind of stood out to me this year were Northwestern and Michigan State. And the fact that I think both utilize a lot of like pin down actions or floppy actions, which is just like where you have a guy underneath the rim. He can go off either way, off of a single pin down or a stagger pin down on either end of the floor. And just the way that they kind of use off-ball screens to get shooters open or allow their guards to kind of work from there. I would say those are probably the 2 in my head. But this is something I might try to dive into deeper or in the offseason more because I think it's a really good question, a really interesting question to have. So got a couple from the chat, and then we will get out of here. From Ulamog, what the hell happened to MSU? Are they still in a good position for the tournament? They just like they were MSU this year. And with that, I mean, just like they won some games, they lost some games they probably shouldn't have. Their big thing that's helping them is, aside from like a Wisconsin game early in the year, or Wisconsin game twice, and then the at Northwestern, they never got blown out. They never got beat badly. And so their metrics are going to be good. I think a win against Minnesota in the first round, I would assume lock them in to the tournament. If they win Minnesota and Purdue, which is who they would play next, then obviously they will for sure be in. A loss against Minnesota, and it's gonna be rough. Maybe they sneak into the last spot, but that kind of goes back to the should a Michigan State team that's 18-13 but has really good metrics, has some good wins, but also just hasn't won a ton. Should they get in over like an Indiana State type? But it was too. It just felt like on offense at times it was just too much reliant on Tyson Walker, on AJ Hogarth to just be like, we need you to create literally anything. When you combine that with not having any big on offense, like Sissoko, Cooper, even I know Kohler was hurt for a lot of the year, but he hasn't been great so far either on offense. Like when you have dominant guards, you can get by in some games, but they needed some sort of presence. Like if Xavier Booker was ready more and be that guy that could fill in, just to give them some sort of something on offense, that would have been huge, but they didn't. And so it was a relying on defense, and just at times they couldn't quite get enough on offense. There was one more question. Where is it? Here it is from Patty Ice. Joe, do you think MSU, who's 18-13, has a better resume than Ohio State? I would say probably yes. It's close though. I think Michigan State's a little bit better, in large part because of just you know one how they lost. Like Michigan State was in the game a lot closer for a lot of the games. Ohio State has probably the slightly better win against Alabama, but Michigan State has the Baylor win to kind of I would say pretty similar in that aspect. But like I don't know. Ohio State, obviously, some of it's just the metrics too. When you have to take those into account. Michigan State did a great job of not getting blown out really ever, and if they did, it was to pretty good teams, to tournament teams. Ohio State lost. They lost by 25 to Northwestern, 14 to Nebraska, which both of them are tourney teams. Lost at Michigan, lost at IU, lost at Penn State, lost at Minnesota. Like there's just there's just too many, and I guess you could say the same for Michigan State. So I do get that. They're pretty close. I would give it to Michigan State, though, just because I think they had a little bit better non-conference. Let's see. Michigan State was 76th toughest non-conference. Ohio State's was 252nd. So aside from, because Ohio State, that Bama win, fantastic. They didn't have another non-conference win over a top 100 KenPom team the whole time. They didn't pick up their fourth win over a top 100 KenPom team until January 20th. And so they're going to be another team that they probably need to win 3 in the Big Ten tournament would be my guess. So yeah, those were the questions. I appreciate everybody tuning in, giving questions, just interacting with me on Twitter at Joe Jackson CBB. Also, you're obviously here on YouTube. You can go check out a lot of my film breakdowns. My goal is to do at least 2 film breakdowns a day during the Big Ten tournament. I also have a lot planned for next week. The plan is to have a film breakdown of every single opponent for every Big Ten team that's in the tournament. So right now there's going to be between 5 and 7. Most likely the number will be 6. The 5 being 5 locks: Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern. Michigan State probably be in, and then one of Ohio State, Iowa maybe could slide in. Shannon Cox brings it here. If the Ohio State Iowa winner can beat Illinois, they could make the tournament. I totally agree. Iowa, I think if they do this, if they beat Ohio State and Illinois, I think they're in. Ohio State, just the way that it's gone, they might have to pick up a third, but those 2 might be good. And so there might be 7 previews for me there. And then I'll do film breakdowns for hopefully most of the March Madness games and things like that, at least involving Big Ten teams early on. As it progresses, as long as Big Ten teams are in, I will do all those. And then probably incorporate some of the others as well. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Potentially back tomorrow previewing the Big Ten tournament, to be determined on that. If I am, it'll be about 6 or 7 o'clock Eastern time. So once again, thank you for tuning in. This will be on YouTube. It's also on Apple, Google, and Spotify podcasts. If you prefer that, you can follow me on Twitter at Joe Jackson CBB, and we will potentially see you tomorrow.